So when Andy came and his father came, they told me what was wrong and gave me a little history, not much. All I knew was that his legs were losing its use and that his life was being threatened.
Andy, the youngest member of the Pedro family, was just like any other young, energetic boy. But one day, something began to go horribly wrong. It was the beginning of a nightmare.
When Andy started to complain about him being tired when he comes home one evening, really never thought about it. And then after a while, we realized that he started to move a little slower.
For a while, Andy's parents thought their son was play acting.
And I spoke with the principal and his teachers who told me that, it wasn't an act because it was actually happening at school as well.
We used to notice it at home, but I used to think that he was doing that to get away from doing his chores.
I would say sometimes very harsh things to him to get him to do things like why he's play acting, or I don't believe something is wrong with you, you're trying to get away from the job, or you're getting away from your house chores and things. So when I realized that he was that bad off and I might lose him, it came back to haunt me then that I shouldn't have said some of those things.
Realizing precious time had now been lost, Andy's parents knew they had to take action immediately. They rushed him to the doctor.
Apparently, as soon as he saw and heard the symptoms, he had an idea what it is was happening with Andy. And then he gave him some tests, simple walking tests, to put a book on his head, to hold a book and walk with it.
The doctors were perplexed, but they narrowed down their diagnosis to two possible fatal conditions: muscular dystrophy or a rare neurological disorder known as Guillain-Barré syndrome.
I was numb. I was numb for about 5 minutes. I just sat down. Annie, I remember crying.
According to the doctors, whichever diagnosis proved correct, the results would ultimately be the same: death.
She said, listen, this boy could go into a coma immediately or within the next couple of hours. So she gave us a letter, did up a letter and everything, and she sent him directly to the hospital.
Their hope was beginning to flicker, but they continued to pursue answers at the hospital.
And immediately they started to do tests, they take blood samples and everything. Watching the nurses after nurses, doctors, just taking these syringe full of blood. He was just there, innocent and not knowing what to do and everything.
Andy's older brother, Richie, was devastated.
It hurt. It's just seeing him from knowing what he used to be, running around, to being bedridden. The change was just drastic.
Going to the hospitals and I would be asking God, why Andy? Let it happen to me, give me his illness and let him be okay. And I would be driving into San Fernando and my eyes would be just filled with water. I'd be actually crying, driving, and what was remarkable, I was behind a taxi and I couldn't see anything. And I looked at a sign. It was a bumper sticker. And the bumper sticker read, "Put all your troubles in Jesus Christ and everything will be okay." And I knew there and then that God was on our side.
One day, Andy's uncle stopped by the hospital to see him. He felt very strongly that what medical science did not have answers for, God did. He suggested that Andy be brought to church and prayed for by the pastor.
We had a powerful service that morning. And I remember at the end of the service, when we made the altar call, some of the first people that came was Terry and Annie and Andy, and he was kind of dragging his feet along, coming towards the platform.
I was crying like, I don't know what. And, I carried him up and Pastor prayed for him. Almost 10 minutes, Pastor was praying for him, and Pastor actually got weak. He couldn't stand anymore. He had to bring a chair for Pastor Sammy to sit down.
I stayed at the back because I remember that I was crying all the time. I wasn't able to think. I just didn't know how to react.
Everybody in the church was praying for Andy at that time, so I know that something had to happen.
The hospital had reluctantly allowed Andy out for only the church service.
Like any other family, when you're facing death in the family, when you're facing the prospects of having the doctors diagnose that this disease is going to take over the body of this child, affect his heart, affect his joints and his muscles, that he wouldn't live to be 13 years old. I think in that kind of situation, you would imagine that parents become very concerned.
That same evening, Andy's parents took him back to the hospital, still believing God for a miracle.
I stayed along with him. I stayed until the very evening. He got up the evening and he said, "Mommy, I need to go to the toilet." He got through and came back all by himself. I didn't need to help him. He even went so far to say, "Mommy, I was able to. I'm not sick anymore. Can we go home now?"
The doctors were perplexed.
So they couldn't believe what they were seeing either. And they asked if they can do more tests. And they redid the spinal tap. They redid maybe about 6 different blood samples. And they even went further to take out a piece of his tissue from his leg, from his calf muscle, to do a muscle biopsy, a tissue biopsy. And then I was angry, because to me the doctors they wanted to prove that he had something remaining. And there was unnecessary blood sampling. Some of the doctors came and they would stick his hands 3 times to get blood. After 10 minutes, another doctor would come, they needed something, until we got angry with them and said, "Okay, that's it. Whatever you all have, you have to test that. We're not going to let you stick him anymore."
24 hours later, the results had come back. Andy was completely healed. It was a miracle.
I got there after school and Daddy was smiling, Mommy was smiling, and they was sitting up on the bed. It's like, what's going on? You know, and when they told me, it was like just weight, this heavy weight just lifted up.
Well, it proved to me that Jesus, God, existed, and when he promised, he would keep his promise, and that he did for us.
Today, Andy Pedro is back, doing what other young boys do.
He's playing tennis, he's playing football.
Cricket, do karate, I go to swim, I help in the church stuff, like packing up equipment.
When he couldn't walk with a book in his hand, now he helps carry speakers and microphones and different stuff.
He's a favorite at church. People look at him and they remember what went on. They call him the miracle baby.
And since that, and he's 13 years, or was 13 years in January this year, which he passed the 2 death years, as they would have put it. And he has shown no signs or have gone, he has never looked back since. Since then, Annie and I have joined the church, we have been baptized, and we intend to serve God for the rest of our lives.